A possible world is a way the real world could have been. The language of possible worlds is a handy way of referring to the possibility that things in the actual world might have been different. It is possible that George Bush won the presidential election in 1992. This possible but non-actual state of affairs can be referred to in terms of a possible world in which the proposition George Bush wins tenselessly the 1992 US presidential election is true, in which the state of affairs George Bush winning the 1992 US presidential election obtains. To take examples from a far, more distant point in history, all manner of things are known about Socrates, who lived in the actual or real world. He was snub-nosed. He was married to Xantippe. He was the teacher of Plato. He was a sculptor, and he was executed in 399 BC. These propositions about Socrates would have to be included in any complete list of true propositions about the real world. But if Socrates had been snub-nosed, or had not taught Plato, or had not been executed, all these possibilities can be considered by suggesting possible worlds in which Socrates had a Roman nose, or ran in the Olympic marathon, or kicked Plato out of his class for cheating, or died of old age. In other words, it is possible to imagine innumerable possible worlds in which Socrates exists that differ in some ways from the real world. All that is required to have a possible world that is different from the real world is for one state of affairs that obtains its real world to be altered in one respect. As it is possible for Socrates to have different colored eyes or not be bald, then imagine a possible world in which a blue-eyed Socrates with a full head of curly hair plays third base for the Cleveland Indians. How many possible worlds are there? Possibly the answer is a very large number. What is a possible world and its logical possibility? The indispensable condition any state of affairs must meet in order to exist in some possible world is logically possibility. Something is logically possible if its description does not include a logical contradiction. 2 plus 2 equals 3 is necessarily a false proposition. 2 plus 2 equaling 3 is a logical possibility of state of affairs. Hence, there is no possible world in which the state of affairs expressed in the last sentence can obtain. There is no possible world in which 2 plus 2 can equal anything other than 4. Likewise, there is no possible world in which the state of affairs 2 plus 2 equaling 3 can obtain. Possible worlds and its physical possibility. Something is physically possible if someone can do it. Physical possibility can vary from world to world. Once upon a time, it was physically possible for a human being to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. But then a man named Roger Bannister did, and suddenly running a mile that fast was physically possible. But long before Roger Bannister performed his feat, there were many possible worlds in which running a mile that fast was a common occurrence. So long as a description of some state of affairs is logically possible, there are possible worlds in which those states of affairs exist, even if in the real world they are physically impossible. But consider an act that is logically impossible, such as squaring a circle. Since squaring the circle is logically impossible, then it cannot occur in any possible worlds. But if something is logically impossible, then it cannot be physically possible in any possible world, including the real world. Hence, there is possible worlds in which Ron Nash is the world's greatest pianist, and/or golfer, and/or basketball player, and so on. If a state of affairs is logically possible, there are possible worlds in which it can obtain. A possible world is a complete state of affairs. With this point, we advance our understanding of a possible world a bit further. It is a mistake to think that 1 or 100 state of affairs as possible worlds. A possible world is and must be so complete that any attempt to squeeze even one more state of affairs into that world is impossible. The reason is because that extra state of affairs would prove to be logically incompatible with the complete state of affairs that make up that possible world. For each possible world, there is a book about that world. The word book in this context is a technical term. As we have seen, every possible world is a complete state of affairs, such that not even one more state of affairs can be added to it without introducing a logical contradiction. As we have also seen, corresponding to every state of affairs in the possible world, there is a true proposition. The sum total of all true propositions about a possible world makes up what some philosophers call the book about that world. The book about the real or actual world is the sum total of all true propositions about our world from the beginning to its existence. Consider the sum of all true propositions about your life from its beginning. That would continue a rather hefty body of propositions. Obviously, then the book about the real world is even more intimidating in size and detail. Should this new point about books about possible worlds seem daunting, stop and think about the points you accepted earlier in this video. It is all true and properly formulated. Propositions are eternal entities and are eternally true. Then no great leap is required to conceive a sum total of these propositions as composing the book of our world. Earlier I suggested the mind of God as the proper locus for all these propositions. When one conceives of God as an omniscient being, that is, as an eternally divine person who believes all true propositions and who holds no false beliefs, accepting the book on the real world requires no great leap of faith. If all true propositions subsist eternally in the eternal mind of God, whence comes any difficulty in calling the sum total of these propositions the book about the real world? This is a good time to explain my earlier point that a possible world is a complete state of logically possible affairs. Consider the totality of the propositions corresponding to each logical possible state of affairs in some possible world. This complete set of propositions about possible world A in such that any attempt to add another proposition to the book about the world A would introduce a logical contradiction into that book. The book on world A is so complete that any other proposition one might attempt to add to the book would be logically incompatible with one of the other propositions in the book of world A. And so as possible worlds cannot be reduced to such limited states of affairs as the reign of King Henry VIII of England, or the baseball career of Babe Ruth, or the presidency of Ronald Reagan. All of these examples are what some have called a slice of a possible world. The heaven that Christians believe will follow physical death, the final judgment, and the end of the world should also be viewed as a slice of a possible world. The actual world does not end with death of any or all human beings, or with the destruction of the earth.